All right, welcome back, everyone. So before we get into the next chapter, let's review what happened beforehand. So let's throw that up. All right, so we had Menelaus, the Greek, is hit with a Trojan arrow, and this just starts the warring up again. Like there was supposed to be a peace or a truce for the time being. Some Trojans shot that arrow, and now war's on again. The Greeks, and with the big help of Diomedes, you got Odysseus, and then the goddess Athena was helping the Greeks, they pushed back the Trojans all the way to their walls. Now Hector, he's like, man, I know I'm going to die, basically. Or he thinks he's going to die. So he goes home to his wife real quick just to say goodbye, his wife Andromache, as well as their baby. So he's basically saying, peace be with you guys. I'm out. I got to go fight. Now, while there in Troy, he sees Paris and he's like, Paris, what are you doing sitting around here just messing around? Get out here and let's go fight. So he's kind of pushing him around now and basically saying, it's time for you to get going too. And that's where we left off. So the next chapter is the High King's Embassy. And let me switch the screen so you can see this. And I'll leave this up on the screen for a little bit as we go along because it's going to be important. Paris caught up with his brother and they went down from the Scaean Gate together as though there had been no hard words between them and plunged right back into the fight. At their coming, the Trojans took fresh heart and rallied. They're like, yeah! Once again, the battle surged outward from the walls of Troy, and the Greeks were driven back and back, almost to the black ships. And so terrible was the slaying among them, or the killing, that Athena, seeing the slaughter as she looked down from the peaks of Olympus, paid no heed to the jeweled robe newly laid across the knees of her statue in the great temple of the high city of Troy. She determined to stop the fighting for what remained of that day. So she's like, I don't care what people are giving me as sacrifices and goodies. I got to stop this thing. It's too deadly. So she put the thought into Hector's mind that, before the sun went down, he should end the day with another challenge to single combat, like the one which his brother Paris had begun, but one which should not end in confusion as the other had done. He called off his men from the chase, sending word by his heralds or messengers to Agamemnon. When both sides were again seated on the ground, he issued his challenge, bidding the Greeks to send out a champion of their own choice against him. So Hector's like, one-on-one, bring somebody out, you want to fight me. Menelaus stepped out to take up the challenge for the second time that day. But the High King would not allow it, knowing that his brother would stand no chance against the mighty Hector. So Hector's a pretty tough dude. So once again, they drew lots out of a helmet, if you remember picking names, and this time the lot fell to Ajax of Salamis, tallest and strongest of all the Greek war host. For the second time that day, the square fighting ground was marked out and into. To meet Hector strode Ajax, blazing bright as the god of war himself, and carrying his great shield made of 7 ox hides behind a layer of bronze. So this is a thick shield. They taunted each other like, yeah, I'm going to beat you, I'm going to beat you, that type of thing. And after the manner of champions about to fight, and then they betook them to their spears. They got their spears and they're ready to fight. Hector made the first cast, whoosh, and his spear went through the bronze and through 6 ox hides until the 7th held it. Then Ajax threw an answer, and his point went through shield and worked breastplate, but did no other harm, for Hector had leapt sideways on the moment. Both men dragged out the throw spears and flung themselves upon each other, stabbing with their spears shortened. So now they're like jabbing at each other, fighting. Ajax's blade caught Hector on the side of the neck so that the dark blood welled out. Hector's spear rang on the boss of the center of Ajax's shield, and the point was turned. He flung it aside and caught up a black and jagged stone lying nearby and crashed it upon the shield. But Ajax sprang back up and, heaving up yet a heavier stone, hurled it with all his strength against Hector, smashing the shield in on him, taking the strength from his knees and flinging him over onto his back. You can see that in that picture. Hector's world darkened and swam, but he scrambled, gasping to his feet, his hand going for his sword. Ajax's sword was also out, and in a moment more they would have been close locked, blade to blade. But heralds or messengers from both armies came running and thrust their staves, or these kind of wooden sticks, between them and bade them or asked them to cease, to stop. For both had proved themselves worthy champions, and the night was coming on. Leaning on his sword, with the sunset dazzling in his eyes, Hector agreed to their command. Let us stop the fighting for this day. We shall fight on afterward until the gods send one of us to victory. But now the day ends, and it is good to give way to the night. I am content to do as you say, Ajax replied, and they looked at each other without hatred. Then Hector said, Maybe we shall meet again in battle. Therefore let us part with an exchange of gifts, that people may say of us in time to come, those two fought as enemies. But when they parted, they were joined in friendship. He sent for a sword with silverwork on the hilt and gave it to Ajax. Here's a gift, Ajax. And Ajax gave him in return a broad belt with rich purple. Back then, purple was very expensive. If you had something purple, it was good stuff. And so they parted and went back, each to his own side. So they each gave a gift and they went back. And night came seeping among the ancient grave mounds and the tamarisk scrub. So basically, night is coming on that field that that we saw from the previous times. Next day, there was a truce or a peace between the armies while both Greeks and Trojans gathered and burned their dead on great pyres across the plain. So back then they would set up like kind of, if you've seen some wood logs or something, and they would put the bodies on it and burn the bodies back then. That's how they did it. Or at least a lot of times that's how they did it. And in the night and day that followed, the Greeks built a wall of turf and stakes all along the landward side of their camp, with a ditch before it deep and broad enough to overset any chariot that tried to cross it, and strong gates with shooting towers on either side. So as they had this peace and everybody's relaxing for the time being, the Greeks were like, man, we got to make some defensive stuff here. So they made these ditches, they made some walls, they've got towers where they can throw spears from them. So they're set up now by their boats or maybe closer to their boats. With the first daylight, the fighting began again. And all that fierce and weary day it surged to and fro, back and forth. Twice Hector's charioteer was killed beside him, and twice he found a new driver for his raging horses and went plunging on, slaying or killing as he went. You can imagine you're on a chariot, your driver, the guy who's driving your chariot while you're killing people, he gets hit with arrows. You just push him aside and get another one on there and keep going. This is crazy. Once, Diomedes would have swept the Greek charge to the very gates of Troy. But Zeus, the Lord of all gods, saw him and gathered his rolling storm clouds, and out of the middle of them loosed crashing thunder and a wild lightning bolt that struck the ground in front of Diomedes' galloping horses. So I'll show you this picture. So as you'll be able to see down below, you'll see all the fighting going on, the horses and the spears. And then it looks like that's Zeus in the clouds putting down that lightning from above, if you can see that. By the day's end, the Greeks were back to their bank and ditch again, with nothing but their ships and the tide line behind them, and despair tightening on their hearts. They're like, oh, this is tough. This is real tough. That night, for the first time, the Trojans did not retreat within the safety of their walls, but unyoked and tethered their horses and sent into the city for wine and food. So usually the Trojans would go back inside the gates and then come out to fight. This time they're like, man, we're doing pretty well. We're not even going to go back home yet. We're just going to hang out here. They built great fires on the plain, as many fires as there are stars in the sky, and 50 men encamped around each, eating and drinking and listening to the music of flutes, while the horses munched white barley fodder of food. And there they remained, waiting for the dawn that would surely bring them victory. So the Trojans are getting pumped. They're getting a little arrogant, like, yeah, we got this. We're going to take them down. We don't have to worry. Meanwhile, in the Greek camp, Agamemnon, in black despond, was like, oh, this is tough. He summoned a meeting of the leaders. He's like, okay, guys, everybody together, all the leaders. He told them in grim or serious earnestness this time that since Zeus the thunderer had set his face so utterly against them, he saw nothing for them to do but burn their camp and launch their ships under cover of night and sail for their own land, giving up all thought of Helen and the conquering of Troy. So Agamemnon's like, Zeus is against us. He's the highest god. We better get out of here. But Diomedes stood up and said, loud enough for the whole camp to hear. This is everybody, not just the leaders now. Let the high king sail home if he has not the heart to remain here. For the rest of us, we will remain until we have taken Troy down. The first time the high king had spoken to them of abandoning the siege, the blood of the war host had been cold and weary. But now the bitter brightness of battle flared within them and changed all that. So everybody was excited. They were not for leaving the thing unfinished, nor for shaming their comrades or brothers in arms, the ones who had battled, who had died already in the fighting. And the warriors set up a great shouting that they were with Diomedes and would fight on until the thing that they had come to do was done. And the ancient king Nestor, always the wisest of the council or group, got up in their midst and said that the time had come when they must seek at all costs to win back Achilles to fight in their ranks once more. Let Agamemnon the high king send an embassy to his hall and promise to return the girl, Briseis, and make him rich gifts of gold and horses, and ask his pardon for the past insult. So we got to bring Achilles back. We need him now. For, said the old man, if he returns to fight among us, the Trojans, hearing of it, will lose heart almost before he mounts into his chariots, and we shall drive them back within their walls and hold them penned as we used to do. Or better still, cut them off and harvest them, as men harvest a field of corn, so that never again will they come to their own gates. So Nestor is basically saying, we need Achilles back, and when Achilles comes back, he's going to scare the heck out of these Trojans, and we are going to kill everybody. We're going to win this war. Agamemnon pulled at the black jut of his beard, and his brows drew together. But in the end, he admitted the wisdom of Nestor's words. And so in a short while, Odysseus and Ajax, who were among the closest of Achilles' friends, and old wise Phoenix, who had been his tutor before ever he went to Chiron in the mountains of Thessaly, set out for the place at the far end of the camp where his black ships were drawn ashore. So they're going to head out and meet Achilles. And there they found him, Achilles, sitting in the doorway of his turf-thatched hall, playing idly on his lyre, so he's just playing a little instrument, with the silver crosspiece. And Patroclus, remember Patroclus, his best friend, at a little distance, polishing his helmet and listening with a troubled face to the music that he made. So here's an image of it. Achilles leapt up to welcome them when he saw them coming. He asked Patroclus to bring food and wine, and a while they were feasting together as though there was no trouble between them in all the world. And when the feasting was over, Odysseus, speaking for the rest, told Achilles the reason for their coming, that they brought the high king's humble plea, please take this, for pardon for the insult and the injustice done to him, and his promise to return the girl Briseis. If you remember that, Agamemnon says, I'm going to give you back Briseis, and with her, rich honor gifts of gold and horses and slaves. So not only will Achilles get Briseis back, he's going to get a bunch of gold, he's going to get some beautiful horses, and maybe some slaves too. The promise of wide lands and his own daughter in marriage when they came again to their own countries, and also a bunch of free land, and I'm going to promise you to get somebody as a marriage person. And not a marriage person, but a wife, and my own daughter. All of this, if Achilles but would leave his anger and come again to his place among them in the battle mass. So if he came back to fight, you get all of this, Achilles, and I'm sorry. Patroclus, standing nearby, listened with hope brightening in his face. But Achilles had nursed his anger so long and allowed it to dive so deep within him that now he could not let it go, even if he tried. When Odysseus had done speaking, he said only, very splendid are the promises of the high king. But what reason has he ever given me to trust his promises? that because of them I should put my life, which is the only life I have and sweet to me, in black peril, in danger? I'd rather run my ships down into the water and sail homeward on the morning tide than follow such a king as he. And he kicked at a spitting pine log that had rolled half out of the fire. I care nothing for the high king's gifts, and if ever the time comes, I will win for myself a wife of my own choosing. Then Phoenix spoke up, and the old man was near to tears. When you were a child, I tried to teach you to be a man great enough to master your own anger, and to forgive when the time came for forgiving. Until now, with the wrong against you still unrighted, it was proper that you should hold to your anger. Indeed, honor demanded it. But now the High King is ready to make amends. He's saying sorry. Now he asks your forgiveness and sends words of peace to you by men who are your dearest friends. Now the time has come to lay your anger by the side and return to your comrades in their desperate need. And Ajax added his own word. Maybe it would have been better if he had not. Saying that all this was because of one girl? And the High King was ready to give her back and all this other stuff besides. But Achilles said only, Ajax, Odysseus, Phoenix, my friends, go back to Agamemnon and tell him this. I will not fight until great Hector sweeps the Trojan charge right to the prows of my own black galleys, my black ships. Then, and only then, I will give him work for his spears. So if that happens, then I'll fight. Until then, goodbye. And with that, for his last word, the embassy, or that little group, had to go back along the store-wise camp to the hall of Agamemnon, the High King. There's a little image here at the bottom. So that is it for the chapter 6. So intense stuff this time, man. A lot of killing, a lot of battling. Achilles doesn't seem like he's going to go back to fight, which doesn't look good for the Greeks. But what we're going to do real quickly, let me pull up my own notes so I know what I'm doing here. So we're going to do, I got a few questions for you, a couple questions, and then one face. I'm excited about this face. So one of the questions, Agamemnon, the High King, he was ready to sail home. But a soldier named Diomedes stood up against the king's wishes. So why do you think Diomedes did not want to sail home? I mean, they're getting their butts whooped. They're getting really beat at this point too. Why would he and other soldiers not want to go home? And the second question, do you think Achilles at the end there is making the right decision by not accepting Agamemnon's offers? All this stuff. I'm sorry too. He's saying sorry. Do you think Achilles is right not to accept? And a kind of connected question. I'm just curious. Have you ever been as angry as Achilles? And it was so hard that you might not have made the best decision because you were super angry in the moment. I mean, I've had that. I'm curious about you. Okay, the face. This is Achilles at the end when he thinks he's made the right decision. Okay, so he's made his decision, and in his mind he's like, "Oh, this is the right decision." Okay. So that's my face. All right. What is yours? I'd like to see it. Of course, I'm not going to be able to. Maybe you send me a picture of you doing the face or something. Anyways, we will see you next time for the chapter, which is the horses of King Rhesus. Rhesus, Rhesus, kind of like Reese's peanut butter cups, but different. Anyways, we'll see you next time, guys. Adios.